Thank you for joining us. We have lots of you in person here, but we also have an equal and maybe a few more on Zoom. So it's very exciting. I'm Kate Markert. I'm Executive Director here at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens, and I'm just so happy to welcome all of you. So we're very pleased to have our audiences joining us for tonight's program from here in the theater, but also by Zoom. For those of you in the theater, I think many of you may know the first thing I'm going to tell you, right? Please be sure all of your devices are silenced. You do not want to be the one holding that machine that's barking in the back, okay? Now, for those of you who are joining us by Zoom, you can make yourselves comfortable. Your cameras and microphones are not active. We will not know if you are not wearing shoes. It's all right. And you may submit your questions using the Q&A module on the Zoom menu whenever they cross your mind, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. And I know there are some people who are very well prepared with their questions, so we've got you. For those of you in the theater, please wait until someone comes around with a microphone. Obviously, we want the people on Zoom to be able to hear your brilliant questions as well. So, as many of you know, I'm sure all of you know this, that we close for a few weeks in January. And so February is a fantastic fresh start for us. I hope you've had a chance to see the mansion. We always say you need to bring your sunglasses in February because it is so, it just absolutely sparkles after this very deep cleaning, which I'm sure every one of you do in the spring, right? Top to bottom, right? But we're also greeted by wonderful programs and a fantastic new exhibition on February 15th. Setting Sail, the story of Sea Cloud, will open, and we are going to travel the seas with one of history's most famous yachts that we feel very close to. So tonight begins our four-part series, Great Homes and Gardens. Next week, on February 11th, the designer Hilton Carter will talk to us about the art of interior plant styling and how to grow your plant collection. And then on February 20th, local designer Josh Young will tell us about his recent publication, Artful Home. Then on February 27th, Nicole Juday will explore the fabulous private gardens of homes in Philadelphia. So you'll be able to just run right up and see them after you learn about them. There are limited virtual and in-person tickets that are available for some of these lectures, so be sure to register soon if you haven't already done so. Now, tonight, we are so excited to hear from everybody's beloved Timothy Corrigan, who kicks off our Great Homes and Gardens lecture series with a deep dive into his book, At Home in France. Don't we love that? Please join us for a book signing after the lecture. That's going to take place right outside here, right outside the theater. And I know that many of you already know that the books were available in the museum shop. So I know that many of you already have yours, which was really smart. Timothy Corrigan has been hailed in Architectural Digest as today's tastemaker. He's known for his ability to create a world of European elegance that's infused with California comfortable. Timothy has been named to nearly every top designer list, including the AD 100, Elle Decor, A-List, Robb Report's top 40 designers in the world, the Luke's Gold List, Star of Design, Design Icon Award, and the ICAA Legacy Award. He is the only American designer honored by the French Heritage Society for his restoration of several national landmarks in France. His work has been featured in over 1,000 publications worldwide, and he has offices in Los Angeles and Paris, from which he manages projects around the world for clients ranging from royalty and corporate leaders to Hollywood celebrities. He has designed several licensed collections. Timothy's first book chronicled the restoration and decoration of his landmark chateau in France, which some of us have visited with him. His second book featured several of his projects around the world. Today, he will share highlights from his new book, At Home in France, Inspiration and Style in Town and Country. So now, please join me in welcoming Timothy Corrigan to the podium.
It is a true, hang on, it is a true treat to be here tonight. I absolutely love Hillwood. I think this is my fourth time speaking here. You've got such a jewel, and it's such a special, special place, not just because of the place, the structure, the collection, but the people who are here are really special and really extraordinary. So it's always a treat to come back. And I just actually told Kate that there's going to be a trip that Hillwood's going to be doing to France in the fall of 2026. And I said that I would love to have you all join me. Please come for our cocktails at my apartment in Paris, which you'll see a little bit. So that's going to be hopefully another incentive to join that wonderful trip. So you're probably going to say, well, what is this American guy? Because I've grown up in California, I'm very American. What does an American know about France, and why are we here today? Why do I have a book called At Home in France? Well, I wanted to say that the point of view, which is the equivalent of Vanity Fair, quoted about me, and they said that I was the most Francophile of all American decorators, and that I understand that. It's because, and you're going to hear why, I've actually lived on and off in France for the last 40 years. So, and it's a part of my DNA now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But what was interesting also is that French companies have actually come to me as an American and said, well, we know you're American, but we think that you really understand French culture, so much French design, that we would like you to design some products for us. So I just wanted to talk about two. THG, which if you don't know THG, if you've heard of Cheryl Wagner and Waterworks, it's like a whole nother level up from there. It's like Cheryl Wagner on steroids. It's just that the faucets you're seeing on the far left is one I designed. It was inspired by the Art Deco period. It's now on every single Orient Express car. It's in all their hotels and in their new ships. This and just to give you a single faucet set like that, it's like $5,000. So it's like, whoa. The Royal Limoges, which is the oldest china company in France, started basically in 1797, so you can sort of see it's been around a long time. They actually asked me to develop a collection, and I think I talked about this before. This collection here seen on the green is the only china in the world that has gold on it that you can put in the microwave or put in the dishwasher. So again, it's this combination of beautiful French style but American practicality. And that's something that as a designer, you saw that's really what I'm known for, is this practicality. So we're going to talk a lot about, I'm talking about practicality how it even can find a place in French design. Interestingly enough, when we developed this technology to be able to put it in the microwave and dishwasher, I said, well, you've got to put on the back of those plates that they're microwave and dishwasher safe. And the French manufacturers, no. Monsieur Corrigan, that's way too vulgar. And I said, it may be vulgar, but no one's going to believe it if you don't. So it's there, and it's now the #1 bridal china in America. So we know what we're doing. It's about, if you create something special, you need to talk about it. So again, that's just some background, is to give you some of my credentials to talk about France today and about living in France, which is what I've done for the last 40 years. But let me tell you about how I got to France. I was working in advertising. I was working in New York for a very big advertising agency, one of the, I think we were the second largest in the world, and we were bought by this tiny little English company called Saatchi and Saatchi. When they were tiny when they bought us. When we were number 2, they bought us, they became the second largest in the world. And they asked me to go to Europe to run our European operations. So I moved to Paris, and I was based out of Paris, but I was literally doing, on the road, I was handling 36 different countries and running all of our operations around France and really loving it. But I was not a designer, I was working day to day in advertising. But I decorated my own apartment. I went to the Paris flea market. I went to auctions. I'd never really done that before. I think before that, I probably furnished my house from the equivalent of IKEA. But I started doing that, and before I knew it, my apartment in Paris was featured in House and Garden. I then bought a 17th century manor house in Normandy that was featured, and which I restored. It was featured in the World of Interiors magazine, and I started doing interior design as a nighttime job, and I was really enjoying that. I was in Paris for 7 years working in advertising, and then I got promoted and had to move back to New York, which was a tough thing after having lived in Paris for 7 years. And I got promoted to become the president of the international division of Saatchi and Saatchi. What that meant, though, was I was basically just this. I was a glorified firefighter. I was no longer really involved in the day-to-day aspects of creativity, of developing marketing campaigns, design campaigns. I was really basically just putting out fires, dealing with problems. Any of you who are in management know that that's a lot of what your job is you get away, you're no longer doing the things that got you into that business, but you're just dealing with problems. And I realized I could have been running a paperclip company. There was nothing creative about what I was doing. But I'd continued to work at night doing interior design projects. So I soon realized that my interior design projects that I was doing at night were a lot more satisfying than what I was doing in the daytime. So I decided to leave at sort of the height of that career in advertising and set up my own interior design firm. And again, I say this because many people now are changing their careers. Sometimes we're not doing 2 and 3 careers. And I just want to say that if you're not doing something you really love right now, figure out what it is, because when you find the right path, I really do believe the universe will support you. And it certainly has been very supportive of me in taking that change. So we're going to go, let's go to France, and we're going to start out in Paris. And I don't know if the sound is working. Maybe not. If we'd had sound, you would be hearing accordions and music and saying, "Welcome to Paris." And we're going to start off in Paris. My new book really focuses on Paris and on the French countryside. I'm just going to very briefly talk about the Paris part. There are 20 different arrondissements or zip codes in Paris, and the city's divided up, and you're known by where you live. And I've lived in all different parts of Paris, and the 16th arrondissement is the home of some of the great museums. The Trocadero is there with an incredible view of the Eiffel Tower. If you saw the Olympics this year, a number of the events were centered at the Trocadero. It's incredible area because it has some of the wonderful museums of Paris. What it's also known for is it is the richest single zip code in all of France. So it's not uncommon to say le 16e or the 16th as just a quick buzz phrase of, oh, they got a lot of money. So it's also the richest zip code. And for years when I was living in Paris, I would think, oh, the 16th, it's stodgy and boring and old. And I was in another apartment in a different part of town, just during COVID, I had to move because Hermes bought the building directly next door to me, and there was going to be a construction for 4 years. And so I actually found this apartment in the 16th, and I always thought, 16th, stodgy, old. And then all of a sudden I looked at the mirror and I said, wait, you're stodgy, you're old. So it didn't seem so strange to move there. This is my apartment building. You can sort of see this, it's the entire floor here with just a beautiful, beautiful architecture. It was built in the Belle Epoque period, the late 19th century. This is the lobby of the building. And you can sort of see, I mean, even Parisians who've lived in Paris all their life say, oh my God, I've never seen a lobby, an apartment lobby like this. I mean, it's really spectacular. The Belle Epoque period was an period really built to impress. You think about Marcel Proust and that whole period. This is when this was built. It was really about showing where you were in the world. So again, this is this incredible lobby with, you know, again with beautiful carvings, etc. This could be a hotel lobby. Imagine this is an apartment building with 5 apartments. So there's one apartment per floor, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful building. I very consciously, I'm not going to go spend too much time on this Paris apartment, but this is, if you come on this Paris trip with Hillwood, you'll come and see this in person. But the entrance hall, I intentionally wanted of my apartment to feel very different. I wanted to say, no, you're not continuing in that same ornate Belle Epoque period. So I purposely mixed it with a mixture of more contemporary. This is an Italian mirror from the 1940s, a console table that I designed out of bronze, a mixture of different architectural and design periods. Again, to sort of say, an entrance hall is an opportunity to say you are someplace special, you're someplace different, and I really wanted to say you're someplace different than you were just when you're out in that hallway. There are 2 wonderful living rooms that are totally that open up onto each other, and I just want to focus on them just briefly because they are. I'm going to show the 2 rooms. I'm going to go back and forth. So this is the first one. This is the second. They open up onto each other. What you're seeing is, and it's going to be the key thing you're going to hear about a lot today, is symmetry. Symmetry is one of the most essential parts of French design. Symmetry is so important. More and more research is actually coming out. I'm going back for you to see. But research is showing, let me get this right, here we go. Research is showing that a space that's symmetrical, you automatically feel more comfortable in that space. Your mind's not trying to figure out, well, where's the exit? Where's this? Your mind processes it all and says, oh yeah, if that's on the left, that's on the right. And you feel calmer. And again, so I think one of the things that the French have always understood is this aspect of introducing symmetry, and you're going to see it later in some of the architecture, et cetera, as a way of really good design. Now, that does not mean that if you have to have everything exactly the same. So in this case, you can sort of see, yes, it all kind of, if there's an urn on the right, there's an urn on the left, et cetera. But this room is, again, this was the first room you came into. I wanted it to be not what you were expecting with spindly little gold furniture. You were coming in from that very formal entrance hall. This is just big, comfortable, overstuffed furniture. And because I didn't want you to have to worry about how you live in it, this is, as a designer, I am incredibly practical. This is all outdoor fabric, which I designed for a company called Perennials. So you can pour red wine on it, and you don't have to worry. Dogs can pee on it, which they will do, and you can clean it all up. So it's all about practicality. The other room, so again, you're seeing this next room, again, the mirror's the same, the fireplace is the same. This room's a little bigger, but again, it's got that symmetrical balance. So again, you see the symmetry. That means you can also add some elements of asymmetry, but again, you want to maintain and focus on that symmetrical aspect with introducing asymmetry. Here, this is not outdoor fabric, this is silk velvet. If any of you have had silk velvet in your home, you know that if you look at it funny, it will stain. So this is much less practical. But again, I want to talk that aspect of symmetry as being a key part of French design. One of the other key elements of French design is architectural detailing. And again, so in America, for example, we've got incredible buildings with beautiful architectural detailing, but we don't necessarily highlight it. We don't make it special. You can see here on the left, there's a picture of a part of the ceiling. I painted that ceiling in 6 different shades of creams and whites, so that you actually start to appreciate the detailing. Again, if you just paint something all one color, you actually don't see those details. And that's one of the things that the French really understand. It is not uncommon for a French room with paneling to have 3 or 4 different colors of paint to actually appreciate those details. And I think that's something that's very uniquely French. And again, so even here we can see there's this very subtle little shade of lavender, just to picking up some color that's somewhere else in the room. But again, it's those small details that make a difference in French design. In the book, I also, let me go forward. In the book, I also talk about my guide to Paris, having lived there for so many years. I've got some incredible little secret places that a lot of people don't know about. The first one is about new things that are in Paris. How many people have been to the new Hôtel de la Marine in Paris? I see 3 people, 4 people. Okay, it is the most. I'll tell you, it's a reason to go to Paris. It's right on the Place de Concorde. There's the Crillon building on the left. There's this big building on the right. Louis XV had it built because that was his square, Place de Concorde, and he had it built. He didn't know what to use it for, so he used it as the warehouse for all of his extra furniture. And it stayed that way until the French Revolution, when it was sacked. Everyone went in and basically took all the furniture, took all the antiques and sold them, etc. It then became the Ministry of the Navy, or the Marine, and it served in that function until 10 years ago, when they decided that it was not practical to have this big old building. The Navy needed a higher tech sort of structure to be able to function. So it was turned into a museum, they've restored it all in the original 18th century style. And it is the museum of the future. You put on these headsets, you walk up to a painting, and all of a sudden that painting, let's say of the architect of the building, that painting all of a sudden becomes a video of a man and an actor dressed as the architect, and he's telling you about the building, etc. It's the most interactive museum, and it really is, to me, the museum of where museums are going in the future. So it's an incredible experience, and I talk about a lot of the different wonderful new things to see in Paris. The next is some of my favorite places in Paris. The next is, how many people have been to the Parc Monceau in Paris? Okay, we had more, good. Parc Monceau was a park that was built in the countryside outside of Paris. It's now almost the center of Paris, but it was built by Louis XVI's first cousin, the Duke of Chartres. And he commissioned this incredible garden, private garden, with all these 18th century follies and ruins and things like that. As I say, it is now in central Paris, but you don't see any tourists there. It's basically just all locals, the nannies and the children and people running, etc. And it's just this little secret gem of a fairly good-sized park right in the center of Paris. So I talk about a lot of the things that people don't know about in Paris. So if you're going to go to Paris, I would say read this section, because it's a wonderful section about Paris. And finally, this is so appropriate for a museum like Hillwood. Paris has a number of incredible house museums. One of the things we love about Hillwood is that you get this glimpse into what that life was like at a previous time. You get to see how they live, the kitchen, just as you hear, you get to see the butler's pantry, you get to see the menus, etc. This picture right here is from the Nissim Commando Museum in Paris, which happens to be right on this Parc Monceau. And it's really like Downton Abbey. You get to go into the staff dining room, you look to see the staff little cupboards. You get to see the bathrooms, you see the whole house. And it also has some of the finest 18th century furniture in the world. But again, so there are a number of house museums in Paris. And if you love Hillwood, you're going to love to go see a number of these house museums in Paris. So those are just some of the things that are in the book about the in-town section. From town, we're going to go to, before I summarize this is a quote by Balzac. And I couldn't agree with it more. So it's reason enough just to get on a flight to Paris. We're going to go from Paris. We're going to go to the countryside. And again, I'm sorry we don't have music, but there's lovely music here, and that's a picture of me in a little deux chevaux. Do you know deux chevaux means 2 horsepower? And when I was 16 years old, I went with 3 friends from America, 3 big sort of American football player types, and our parents didn't trust us to do the Eurail, to do the trains. They thought you guys are going to get lost, etc. So one of the parents bought a used deux chevaux for us. We were just, because you couldn't rent a car, you were too young to rent a car. So imagine 4 big American guys in this little car. But they knew truly, most lawnmowers go faster than this car. And so we traveled all around France for 2 months. So this was the way I first experienced the French countryside, was in one of these little cars. At the end of our excursions around France, it was time to go back to school in the fall. And so we hadn't really thought about what we're going to do with this car. So we actually just decided, we went to Orly Airport, we just parked the car, and it's probably still in that parking lot. And I would hate to have to pay the bill. So, But so from there, we're going to go to the French countryside, and I bet you this is if you follow international news, you'll see that there's been a whole, especially since COVID, there has been a whole return to chateau life. There are over 40,000 chateaux in France. And they literally come in all shapes and all sizes, all periods. And these are some of the high-end chateaus that are for sale. So you can see this one is 3.8 million. This one's 5.5. This is actually owned by the King of Morocco. It's one of the. It's a whole village basically. But you can get amazing things for actually not that much money. And this probably has hundreds of acres and, et cetera. The problem is that the purchase price is not so high. It's the restoration cost, because the thing that they probably all have in common is they haven't probably been restored since at least World War II. And that's if they're lucky. So that's one of the challenges of chateau. Now, I have to tell you, this has been a bit of a bait and switch, because you thought you were coming to hear me talk. Well, actually, this is not a talk. This is a Chateauholics Anonymous meeting. My name is Timothy, and I'm a Chateauholic. So I want to just tell you a little bit. I started with that manor house, and you know how most addictions, you start small. You maybe start with beer, and then you were, okay, well, I started that manor house, and I have since gone on to own 4 different chateaux. So I want to tell you about my addiction. My first chateau was the Chateau de Blainville, which you see on the far left. It was a lovely 17th century chateau right outside of Chartres, where the famous cathedral is. And it was a lovely, lovely chateau. I was there for around 5 years. And it's this is sort of a bit of the story of Goldilocks, where you tried it and it wasn't quite right. Well, this one I loved it. It was very pretty, had pretty gardens. But after 5 years, I realized, it's a little plain. The Louis XIII period is not that refined. It's before Louis XIV, so it was a little simple. So I decided to sell that, and I then bought this next chateau, Chateau de Galleron, which is a classic fairy tale chateau. You can almost imagine Rapunzel letting down her hair from this. What I hadn't counted on, this is a 15th century chateau that was added onto in the 17th century, is that at this period, chateaus were built as fortresses. They were strongholds. And so they had very thick walls, like 3 to 4 feet thick walls, and very little windows, because again, it was predominantly for protection. So if you can imagine a little window and then 3 to 4 feet of wall, they are dark. They are very dark inside. So I owned this chateau for, I think, 2 years and did renovation to it, et cetera, but I thought it's just too dark. So another chateau came on the market it was a famous chateau that was owned by the French government, and I think my first book was on this next chateau, and if you remember that, it's an incredible chateau. It was a chateau called Chateau Grand Lucé. This is what the gardens looked like when I was finished with it. It's literally this, it's almost like a town. These are all the buildings of the chateau, et cetera. It was a chateau that the French government owned. It was one of the 8 chateaux that the French government owned. And it was open to the public, but the gardens were kind of mediocre. You couldn't go inside because it had no electricity. The electricity hadn't been updated since World War II. And so you couldn't go inside. And so it didn't get a lot of tourist attraction, visitors. And the French government decided, well, you know what, we should just sell this. So they put it on the market. It wasn't a question of what you were going to pay. They said, here's the price, not a question, no negotiation, here's the price. Now tell us what you're going to do with it. And so there were 8 different organizations, individuals who applied to buy the chateau. And one was Alain Passard, the famous Michelin chef, was going to turn it into a restaurant. Someone else was going to chop it up and turn it into apartments. Someone else as a hotel. And I was the only one who was going to restore it as a private home. The historic monument people in France finally weighed in, and they said, we consider this to be one of the finest examples of neoclassical architecture in France. It had been the center of much of the Enlightenment movement. Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot all spent time here, so it was really considered an important architectural and historical monument. So they said, you've got to award it to whoever is going to restore it as a private home. Now, in this case, the only person who was going to do that was an individual and an American. And so it was kind of went contrary to everything that has happened in France since the French Revolution, which was take from the individual and give to the people. Here, this has been owned by the French people, and it was now being sold to a foreigner. And so it became sort of a cause célèbre in the French press. Le Figaro wrote an editorial. No, it was Libération, the paper, wrote an editorial saying, France is selling its prized jewels, and in this case, to a rich American who buys and sells chateaux like playthings that no longer give him pleasure. I was incredibly hurt because none of it was true, certainly not rich, and certainly, but then now looking back in hindsight, thinking, well, this was my third chateau. It maybe wasn't so wrong. But in the end, the vice president of the French Senate said, we've got to sell it to this individual. We're so lucky to have found someone with broad enough shoulders to take this on. Well, the French can be very polite when they say things. What they really meant was, we were just lucky to find someone dumb enough to take on this financial responsibility off our hands. What I didn't know was that the chateau, all the structure, they don't have things like inspections here like you do there, like we do here like they do there. And so I knew that the roof needed some work, et cetera. The entire slate on all these buildings needed to be replaced to the tune of 6 million euros, which at the time was around $9 million. So, and that was just the beginning of the money pit. I did these incredible gardens, and the gardens are spectacular, but it required 5 full-time gardeners. And that was just in the year-round. You had to add the supplement in the summertime. And it became, what started out as a true love became this incredibly financial burden that I just thought, this is crazy. I'm not living here. I'm spending, at the most 6 weeks a year here, and this is just crazy. So I put it up for sale. It is, I was 2 offers. One is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the other was an American family who bought it and have since turned it into a 5-star hotel. Wow. It has been on the cover of Condé Nast Traveler and Travel and Leisure as one of the top 100 hotels in the world. My bedroom suite rents for 15,000 euros a night. And I sit there and think, gosh, I should have kept it going into the hotel business. So I sold the chateau, and all my family and friends were like, oh, thank God, he's got it out of his system. He's, done. And I thought I really was done with my addiction. But as with most addictions, it takes a little getting used to, and getting out of. And soon I was looking at the ads for new chateaus. And my partner, Kathleen, said to me, you know what? I will consider going along on this idea of another chateau on one condition. You have to go see a therapist. Because you're either dealing with some childhood issues of you weren't given enough Lincoln Logs as a toy to build, or you really think you're Louis XIV, but there's something going on here that's bigger than your addiction. Well, I picked the right therapist because I went and I said, I keep buying this chateau, and I spend a lot of money, and I sell them, and I lose money, and I buy a chateau, and I spend money, and I lose money, and I said, but I keep wanting to do it. What's wrong with me? And she was very thoughtful, just as you can see her here, and she said, the problem is you're thinking of this from the aspect of real estate speculation. That if you buy something, a house, a structure, you improve it, you expect to sell it for profit. That's normal. You cannot think of it this way. This is not a real estate speculation thing for you. This is your hobby. And if you think about having a boat, do you expect to make money from your boat? If you think about being a skier, do you expect, no, you're paying money for those tolls, for the ski lifts, et cetera. It's something you're going to spend money on. So think of it as your hobby, and all of a sudden it'll reframe the way you think about owning a chateau. And I thought that makes sense. That of course I wanted to hear that, but it makes sense. But then I thought, as a designer, it also made sense because it gives me a huge canvas to work on and to try new things and to continue to grow as a designer. So I said, thank you, doctor. This has been so helpful. I went home to Kathleen and I said, pack your bags. We're going chateau shopping. So over the course of a year, we visited over 50 different chateaux. These are the chateaux that I visited. And they were literally from Madame Pompadour's famous chateau on the Loire River to the tiny little Chateau Bagatelle, which is up on the northern part of France, literally all over. And I was sort of debating and which one, et cetera. And then I came upon a chateau that I absolutely fell in love with. And I'd like to share the rest with the stories about that chateau. This is the Chateau de la Chevalerie. This is what it looks like today. It's actually, in France, it's called the Versailles of the Fields, because it's this jewel, but it's literally set in the middle of the countryside. So it's got truly some of the finest architectural detailing in a chateau, 18th century chateau, but it's got this real country house feel. So that's really what I fell in love with, and I just want to show you a little bit about it. But we're going to start with the history on this chateau. This is the original part of the building that was built in 1640, and it was started off as a small little hunting lodge. You can sort of see the original structure it was just that one building. It got added onto over the centuries, and but this was the man who owned the chateau in the 18th century, in the the mid 18th century, and you can see his name is Jean-Baptiste d'Anville. He was considered the greatest cartographer in the world at the time. He did some of the most accurate maps of America. You can see he did for the Duc d'Orléans, who was the regent at the time of America, and some of the most accurate maps. In America, if you've heard of the town Danville, it's named after this man, d'Anville. And this is a picture on the left. That's a picture of him in the courtyard. And you can sort of see he then became the foreign minister under Louis XV. And you can see he's pointing down at a globe and the maps because he's sort of saying, this is my area of expertise, and sort of being the equivalent of the head of the State Department. But he was really sort of saying, this is my responsibility, is the world for Louis XV. The chateau stayed in the same family all of its life. This is the chateau at around 1900. And this was the man who owned the chateau at the time. And what I want to show you here is it had been added on to over time. This wing was added on to in the 18th century. This wing was added on to in the early 19th century. But when they added on, it was not, they did not add it on symmetrically. So you can sort of see that this wing comes out in the middle of the building. This wing comes out after the building ends. So this man was obsessed with symmetry, as many French are. So he built those two towers to hide the fact that the building was not symmetrical. So there's a term, trompe-l'oeil, trick of the eye. This is a very expensive trompe-l'oeil, which is hiding. Now, I'm going to show you other pictures where it becomes very obvious what he did, but here it's more difficult to see. And again, it comes back to that aspect of symmetry. And the chateau stayed in the same family. This is a picture that the family members, I've stayed in touch with them, from when the American soldiers liberated first Normandy, and this is the chateau is right at the southern part of Normandy, right at the transition into Loire Valley. So part of the property is Normandy, part of it's in the Loire Valley. And you can see liberation, La Chevalerie, 12 August 1944. So the young man on the far left was the father of the man that I bought the chateau from as a young man, and there he is with all the American soldiers. When they sold it to me, they said, "Oh my gosh, Americans saved us once before, and now they're saving us again." And they had they were very appreciative. They were so appreciative at the time that they actually gave the land for the American military sources for all of this expansion into the Loire Valley. And I've got photos of all the soldiers, all the tents that were set up all around the grounds because they were there for around 6 months as they were expanding and taking back parts of France. But again, there's a wonderful connection between France and this chateau. The summary for this section of history is this one from a French architect, Le Corbusier, which is, he who understands history knows how to find continuity between that which was, that which is, and that which will be. And I say that because part of what is so important with any architectural restoration is that you have to be respectful for what it was, but you have to understand where we are today and how to appropriately update it for where we are going. Because these buildings, if they're just kept as static timepieces, as time capsules, they don't really continue to live. And so it's so important that you actually figure out how to make them viable for the work of for going forward. I'm currently now the new vice chairman of the French Heritage Society, that's exactly what we do. Is we actually do restoration of buildings all over France and in America that have French background history, but keeping them viable and making them go forward. Because none of us really own our homes, whatever. We are really just the custodian to help it go on for another generation or 2 or 3 or 100. So that's really what makes this whole experience for me so interesting, is being a good custodian. I want to talk about the restoration that the chateau required. Unlike the last chateau, the only roofs that needed to be done were the terracotta roofs, which were some of the outer buildings, so a much less expensive proposition. You just, of course, had to rebuild the roof frames, et cetera, but again, once you're changing it with terracotta tiles, it's much less expensive. The entire building had to be, all the stone had to be cleaned. The stone is all made from a limestone from Caen, the region of the northern part of Normandy, where very close to the D-Day beaches, which is known for a very lovely light-colored limestone. All of the windows and doors had to be restored, and that was a major undertaking. And this all happened during the heart of COVID, during the period of COVID. And so I wasn't able to get there very often, and nor was the man who was managing the project for me. So the painters were working away diligently, but not always carefully, and they used electric sanders on these incredible windows, and in the process destroyed 2,300 panes of 18th century glass. And you can sort of see all these scratches. That's not dirt, those are scratches, which is like, how is that even imaginable? Fortunately, there are companies that still create this wonderful wavy 18th century glass. But it was again, saying that you are the custodian, I really felt like I had lapsed in my responsibility to maintaining the chateau, but to let that happen under my watch. The chateau also, I discovered it had very high water levels, so I decided to put in what are called French drains here in America. When I said that in Europe, they said, "Well, what do you mean a French drain?" Well, it's just a drain for them. You dig down, you put this drainage out around the building to keep water away from the structure, which seemed like a relatively easy thing to do, until we started the process and we discovered that there were all these blocks of granite that had been built for the foundation of the chateau that were extra. So rather than carting them into the woods, they just dug a big pit in the middle of the courtyard and threw hundreds of big granite blocks into it. So that took another couple months to get all those granite blocks out before you could actually put in the French drains. I had to, as I mentioned, there was the electricity all had to be redone. You can see on the far left, you can see those were all the circuit breakers for the house. So that all had to be redone. The house had 5 different furnaces. As of 2030, gas fuel will be illegal in France. So I maintained and updated some of those furnaces for now. But I also added in heat pumps, the electric heat pumps. And the benefit of that is that I now have heat and air conditioning. And what I learned when I was redoing the American ambassador's residence in Paris, where we were updating and putting air conditioning in, we actually used the ducts from the fireplaces the flues to put in the vents, the ducts, so you can now have cool or warm air coming right out of the fireplace without having to see these ugly grills and things like that. So I added that throughout the chateau. I added insulation for the first time in hundreds of years that had ever been there, and I refinished all the Parquet de Versailles floors. Parquet de Versailles is the most special wood flooring in the world. It was actually created for the Versailles, the Gallery of Glass, the Gallery of Mirrors in Versailles. And it is special because all the grains are running in individual ways. That means, again, you can't use an electric sander. You have to hand sand every plank of wood based on the grain of the wood. So it's an incredibly intense, labor intense. Even more so because in France, not every chateau will have Parquet de Versailles. If they do, they're usually only in the main reception rooms. This chateau is unique. The Parquet de Versailles is in almost every room of the chateau on all 3 levels. So again, it meant a lot of work to restore. But one of the things that I fell in love with the chateau was the incredible paneling or boiserie. This is all 3-dimensional. This is not plasterwork. This is all incredible carved wood. It's carved by some of the most important woodworkers of the 18th century. There's actually a textbook being written on the paneling in this chateau alone. And you can see you actually had to hand remove with a heat gun all the paint. You can see the picture on the upper left, and you can sort of see what that wood looks like underneath. And then doing all that and again repainting all the rooms to really accentuate the beautiful paneling. You can see these are over doors in the grand salon. These doors, to give you a sense, these sculptures are 5 feet wide by 3 feet tall, and they're totally 3-dimensional, all carved out of wood. And you can see the arts and sciences are down below, the 4 seasons are up above. So again, just incredible, incredible details, which is part of what I fell in love with. I also redid all the stables. If you saw the Olympics this year, there was horse jumping event at Versailles. The horse which won the gold medal for horse jumping at the 1970 Olympics from Mexico actually grew up in this stall right here. He was trained here. So it was wonderful to watch the Olympics and know that this chateau had a history with the Olympics. And this is what the chateau looks like today. Here you really get a sense. I want to show you here. You see how the roof is continuing on here? And it's not there? But if I had not pointed that out, you would have never noticed it. So that, again, that's the trick of the eye, but it's helping you see and feel that the chateau is symmetrical and balanced. Okay, so this quote from The Little Prince I just love, which is, "I must endure the presence of a few caterpillars if I wish to become acquainted with the butterflies." Anyone who's ever done a restoration of a house, an apartment, whatever, there are going to be things that you were not counting on. And those are those darn caterpillars that just frustrate you, et cetera. The important thing, and I say this to anyone who's going through a restoration, is just go for it, embrace them, know they're going to come, and know that that caterpillar is going to become a butterfly that you later come back and really appreciate. And you'll appreciate it that much more for having gone through that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the other caterpillars that I experienced along the way. But I'm going to first go into the decoration of the chateau. This is the entrance hall of the chateau. It's a wonderful 3-story entrance hall with this wonderful big sweeping staircase. The family crest is on all the staircase. And I decided to have this lantern. I created this lantern, the three-tier lantern, to actually accentuate the drama of this 3-story entrance. Again, I was talking about in entrances earlier. You want to make a wow in your entrance hall because you're actually not spending very much time there. So go for some drama, go for some wow, because if you had all that drama in a room you're living in all the time, it would become a little overwhelming. But how great to do it this way. Here I filled it with, there are paintings of my grandmother, my father, one of my childhood dogs. There are paintings by John Singer Sargent here. There's a painting, there's a photo that Robert Mapplethorpe photographed of the singer Grace Jones, painted by Keith Haring, her body Keith. So it's a mixture. It's a mixture of old and new, really good and stuff I literally found at country fairs. But that's what makes it interesting, is that you go through and you get to see. I've always loved portraits because portraits actually, you see more than the individual. You see the world they're in. There's a lot of iconography in portraits that is really interesting when you spend time. But it makes this whole experience of every time you go up and down the stairs, you experience something new and special on that staircase. The very first room that after you go into from there, just as in the Paris apartment, I wanted you to say, hey, this is not what you're expecting. So this is very grand and formal, I get that. But the very first room you go into is this really casual room. If I didn't show you some of these elements, you could think this was in California. I mean, it's all about light and bright. Again, this outdoor fabric that I designed for perennials. The rug is outdoor. Again, pour red wine, don't worry about it. And again, you can see what it looked like before, what it looks like now. As it was before, it was all white. You didn't see any of the architectural detailing, and now with these 2 different shades of blue and white, you actually start to really appreciate the architectural detailing. But again, yes, there's 2 pieces of gold furniture here, but for the most part, this is not a fancy schmancy chateau. This is a comfortable room you want to hang out in. And that was essentially what I wanted to try to communicate is you're looking from the outside at this formal chateau, and I want you to come in and realize, no, I'm just home. I'm just in a really comfortable place to hang out. The next room was a room it was called the Grand Salon. And how many people have heard of Nancy Lancaster's Yellow Room? There's a couple people. Okay. Nancy Lancaster created a room in London. It was called the Butter Yellow Room, and it's famous in interior design. It then became the offices of Colfax and Fowler, the English design firm, and they recently, this was maybe 6 years ago, decided that they were selling the building and moving, and the room was going to be dismantled. So famous amongst the design world, very famous room. The color was so perfect that I snuck in and took a little what's Benjamin Moore color reader, this little device that you hold up against the wall and it matches the color. I did it very surreptitiously like a spy. And that was it. That was the color, no question. I gave the exact mix of it, the components, etc. I gave it to my painters and I said, you don't have to test this. This is the perfect color. It's famous. It's world famous. Just paint the whole room that way. I got there, and it was fluorescent yellow. It was like, who turned on the lights? Who turned on the electricity? And I was like, oh man, you're smart enough. You're a designer. You're supposed to know you don't do things like that. And I thought about it, and I thought, the room you're seeing on the far left, that's the room in London. It had 2 windows facing north in gray, cloudy London, and to take that color and translate it into the sunny Loire Valley with gardens on the outside, etc., you just can't do that. Which is why if your designer has said, let's put up 5 different colors in a room, it's because every color reads differently in every room, and you really need to see that. So I then again was trying to get this done, etc. So I said, well, let's just take the same color and add 2/3 white just to try to make it. Well, it became wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. So then I did what you're supposed to do is I took and had 4 different colors of paint, tried it again, and found the right yellow. So this is the yellow that I came up with, and it's interesting. We actually and again, yes, it's a chateau. It's fancy, but it's comfortable. It's really about comfortable furniture, almost like an English country house style. We shot this first picture on the right, and for my new book, and it was all we got done. We finished that picture, and it was time to go to bed. The next morning, around 5 in the morning, I heard pounding on my bedroom door, and it was the photographer saying, "You've got to come in. You've got to come in. There's a problem in the yellow salon." And so I talked about caterpillars. Well, I'd like to introduce you to the next problem, which was the plumber from hell. And this is what I discovered at 5 in the morning. Oh, wait, let me go back. Hopefully, there should be sound too. You're not hearing the sound. And is the video playing? I don't think. This is a video, but
is it filling with water?
It's filling with water. Okay. Anyway, this is a lovely video. You'll start. We're not going to see it, but you then see people trying to mop up, etc. There we go. Okay. There we go. There we go. And you're not hearing the sound, but the sound effects are. You're actually hearing the flooding, and I thought, well, you know what? It's not the end of the world. This is Perennial's outdoor rug, Perennial's outdoor sofa. What's the big deal? I thought, until half an hour later when the ceiling crashed in. It took 6 months to dry this room, because if they always talk about water being the enemy of a house. Well, hot water is the arch enemy of a house. What had happened was that one of the plumbers had not adequately put together the pipes with the sink faucets, and hot water pipe broke in the middle of the night, and for literally 5 hours, scalding hot water started flooding the rooms, the bathroom and the rooms adjacent, and these 18th century wood beams were like a sponge. They just filled up and soaked, etc. And so, of course, the ceiling did fall in. And it was, again, with having to have fans and heat, etc., it took 6 months just to get the room dried up enough that you could actually close it up again. So that was one of the other little caterpillars that I experienced. The next room was the library, which was, as you can see, what I looked like on the left, it had fabric panels on the walls, yellow fabric panels, and I was going to replace the fabric on those walls. And I took off the fabric, and I discovered that there had originally been antique mirrors in those panels that were all totally shattered, but they were there. So I decided to have new antique mirror panels added so to exactly match the ones over. So now it's again it's this wonderful. This is a room that was added in the Directoire period. This is late 19th century. Late 18th century. So again, the earlier room was Louis XVI. This is Directoire period, and so it's very sort of wonderful, dramatic room. And the room after that is also from the Directoire period, and you can sort of see what it looked like when I first bought it. Where again, it's just sort of pale colors, not not really focusing on the architectural detailing. But again, then once you add the painting, etc., you start to notice all those beautiful architectural details of the room. This is the dining room, the room which has incredible paneling in it. The panels that we were seeing on the left, that's what it looked like. There had originally been a big tapestry there. It had been removed over the time. So I actually found some 18th century painted panels and inset them into the walls. This is called a Swedish stove. It was developed in the 18th century to give a very regulated heat. It's much, in a dining room, a fireplace actually makes it too hot when you're sitting right next to the end of the fire. So a Swedish stove gives a lovely, even heat. The sister, the twin of this Swedish stove is in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And today, the heat and air conditioning comes out through the center right here through this hole. So it just sort of comes out in a very soft breeze. The bedrooms, I decided when I bought the chateau, there were 23 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. And so I took every other bedroom and turned it into a bathroom. So this is the bathroom for this bedroom. And so you can sort of see I took this wonderful commode, turned it into a sink. The bathtubs I bought from the Ritz Hotel was going to total renovation, so I bought all the bathtubs for the chateau were from the Ritz Hotel. But again, the heat comes out, the heat and air comes out through the fireplace. So again, you would never know that this is this totally contemporary functioning house, but that looks like a wonderful 18th century room. I decided to make each room, so now there are 13 bedrooms, each with their own, 13 bedrooms and suites, each with their own bathrooms. And I decided to make each one very different. So this one's much more contemporary with a Robert Mapplethorpe photo, and the one on the left is sort of more English in style. Here's one that's inspired by Madame Pompadour, another one looking out on the alleys of trees. So again, I really wanted each room to feel very individual and different for my house guests. Let me go on next, hang on. So my summary on this one is from the architect Le Corbusier, which is the home should be the treasure chest for living. It's that place where you go, you really feel that you can be your very best self. And I always, as a designer, I always try to focus on what is it that's going to be unique for each individual to let them be their very best self. And the home can, when it's well done, well designed for their needs, it actually serves in that function. From here, I'm going to move on to how you make rooms work for you today. So that's when I talk a lot about making it function for you. All these old buildings were built for a different way of living. You look at Hillwood, it was built when people had lots of staff. Well, this chateau was built for lots of staff. Well, I don't have lots of staff. So there were a lot of rooms that didn't function for the needs of today. And so it's about figuring out, and I say this to clients, we had some clients who said they never used their living room. And I said, well, if we put a television in it, will you use it more? And they said, no, we've got a family room for that, we don't need that. Well, I started delving more, and they actually were big wine aficionados. So we actually took the living room and built in beautiful mahogany wine cabinets, refrigerated wine cabinets all around the exterior of the room, all their living room furniture in the middle. Well, it's now the room that they use the most because they love the wine, they love collecting it, but it's also a living area. So it's figuring out how to make your rooms work for you today. I say that to everyone, whether you're living in a 2-bedroom apartment and you're not using that extra bedroom, figure out how to make it so that you'll actually use your rooms. So let me just tell you about how I took some of the rooms and made them work for me. This was the original kitchen. It was located around 150 yards from the chateau, and this is very common. I'm working on a project right now in Charleston where the kitchen was in another building for fear of fire, that you didn't want to set the building on fire. So the kitchen was another building. In the 19th century, the kitchen was moved into this room you're seeing on the left, and this is the way it functioned. That's the kitchen when I bought it. It was I mean, it's amazing that the French can make such incredible meals out of tiny little spaces. This was a small room, and I decided I wanted sort of a more traditional American kitchen, you know, with a center island and all that. And so I took this room and turned it into the porcelain room, and I took a room that had been the room where people would go after hunting, because, you know, after with all these, there's at the time, originally there were hundreds of acres of woods. Now there's only 100 acres of woods. But so they would come, they'd go hunting, and then they'd come back and they'd have a breakfast with whatever they caught. And so this on the far left, it was the hunt breakfast room. You can see that on the far left was a fireplace where you would cook the animals. I actually kept it, but then added these wonderful 18th century Delft tiles and made a wonderful sort of American style kitchen, but it feels very much you know, like a French country kitchen, almost inspired by Claude Monet's kitchen at Giverny. This very sort of relaxed space. So again, it's making this house work for me today, and still be able to let it evolve for the future. The next room that I changed a lot was the room on the far left, which was the chapel. And it was the most depressing room you could ever imagine. And I love chapels, but this was a really ugly one. It was dark, dark wood. There was one big stained glass window which didn't let that much light in, and it was really, really depressing. There was only one entrance, and that was from outside. You couldn't get into it from the chateau itself. So I decided to transform it. I had the chapel desanctified. I had a Catholic priest come and desanctify it. And then I thought, because I was really trying to be respectful of the space, et cetera. But then I thought, well, I've got these stained glass window, I've got the pews, I've got the crucifix, what am I going to do with all that? Well, as luck would have it, my brother is an Episcopal minister, and he has a chateau 45 minutes from mine with a chapel that needed everything. So it all just got trucked up, and it's now installed very nicely in his chapel. And I turned it, you can see, into this wonderful, lovely, light, bright breakfast room that actually you enter from the house without having to go outside. I will have to tell you, I have been criticized intensely by the French for doing this. They think that I am the height of, again, a vulgarity, of taking something that was the history of the chateau and turning it into something else. And, but I really think it's so important to be respectful of the architecture, but continuing to make it work for the day we are today. It could easily be turned back into a chapel, very easily. It's just, you know, I mean, the altar, the 18th century altar is still there, et cetera, but it's just being used for another function. And so the final one I want to talk about how I changed was my bedroom. There's this wonderful, it was an artist studio that was actually, it's attached, but at one end of the chateau, which was a wonderful room with like 20-foot ceilings. It originally had glass ceilings because it was an artist studio. During World War II, the ceilings, glass ceilings fell in. And you can see those horizontal bands. Those are actually pipes that would hang art, because it was an art studio where once the painter were done, he'd hang all of his paintings on the walls. I decided, you know, what am I going to do with this room? It's a spectacular room, but I don't need another living room. There's 3 or 4 living rooms already. What do I need that for? So I decided to turn it into my bedroom, which was a great idea, with the exception of the fact that there were no bathrooms anywhere near this whole wing of the house. But it abutted some of the livestock stables. So I turned the livestock stables into a bathroom, and let me go forward. So you can see that's the before left. That's what those tables looked like when I first bought it, the far left. The process of restoring it, having to raise the floor, putting in heating underneath that, stripping back to the beams, etc. And creating a wonderful bathroom. This is what it looks like from the exterior. That's this wonderful little artist pavilion here that you can see. It's the building behind it is the livestock stables, which is now the bathroom and dressing room. And let me just show you what it looks like today. So it's this wonderful garden room. I actually designed the wallpaper for a company called Fromental, and it's called Jardin Français, which is the French garden, because I really wanted it to feel, those are parterres, French gardens. I wanted it to feel like you were really in the garden. So I had the trellis, the lattice work done all around the side, put in simple seagrass rugs, and then put in sculptures, garden sculptures. So again, you had this sense of this inside-outside feeling. To give you a sense of the scale, that chandelier you're seeing in the center is 6 feet tall. So it's really, it's a very, very lofty room. This is the dressing room and bathroom next door. It's so important with landscape is to create focal points outside to help draw you out. So I love taking baths. So I actually put this sculpture of a stag resting, as it were, on a yew hedge, as if it's just come in from the woods and is resting on that hedge. So again, that gives you a sense of some of the restoration that I did for that room. So again, I would take this quote from Voltaire, which is, when it comes to home design, etc., dare to think for yourself. Don't follow trends. Don't follow what anyone else says. Do what really makes sense for you. From there, we're almost done. We're going to go to the grounds, and I want to talk to you about some of the restoration work on the grounds here. This is a map of the grounds that were designed by Edouard André. André was one of the most important landscape architects, certainly in Europe, in the 19th century. He was commissioned at the same time that he was doing the grounds here. He was commissioned to create the Tuileries Gardens in Paris. And as some of you may know, the Tuileries Gardens, before it was the public gardens that it was today, it housed the royal palace in Paris, the Tuileries Palace. It's where Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were brought when they brought it from Versailles, and before they were killed, they were living in the Tuileries Palace. It burned down during around 1860, and the government decided that rather than build a new palace, which they didn't need because there was no more monarchy, they would turn it into public gardens. So they hired Edouard André to design the gardens. And so he was doing those. He was simultaneously doing these gardens. And you can see this is just a small part of the property. The woods continue off, but this is just showing the main gardens. And he created this, in that blue section is this wonderful canal. That he created copying off the canals at Versailles and Vaux-le-Vicomte. And you can see all the wonderful trails, et cetera, through the woods. There we go. This is what the chateau looks like today. So what's interesting is the gates, all the gates at the chateau were the original gates from the Tuileries Palace. So they had no use for them at the Tuileries Palace anymore. So he actually commissioned a special railway car to bring these gates out to Chevalerie. And this is the original color of the gates when they were at the Tuileries Palace. And again, you can sort of see, again, you see the roof detail, the lack of symmetry and how it's hidden, et cetera. But you get a sense of the progression. This is, there's a long, close to a mile long drive. There's a set of these gates at the outside of the property, then a long drive, and then you get to this next set of gates. And here's a moat right here. So speaking of moats, yes. The moat and the canals had not been cleaned in at least 100 years. So I no one even knew how deep they were, because the silt and dirt, et cetera, had settled so much that I had to drain the moat, and we had close to 7 or 8 feet of silt that had settled and so that all had to be taken out and moved out of the canals and out of the moat. And in doing so, of course, you had to rebuild the walls of the moat. So this was the process of rebuilding all those walls and supporting those walls. The 100 acres of woods also originally had clay pipes, drainage throughout the woods that led to the canals and the moat. Of course, they'd all broken over the years, so you can see that whole process of adding drains, et cetera, to 100 acres of woods. And there were wonderful follies all around the chateau and the gardens, which all had to be restored. This is the boathouse that you can sort of see at the end of this canal and the restoration that required. There are alleys of trees all over the chateau, ones right near and then ones that go off, take you into the woods, et cetera. What I did was I intentionally decided to put gravel paths between these alleys, because if you actually need to create invitations for people to go out and explore. I cannot tell you how many people come to the chateau, and I have to drag them even 100 yards from the chateau, let alone out into the woods, et cetera. So I found that you actually have to create reasons for people to go out and explore. And so adding gravel paths was one of those ways. There was, the back of the chateau had this big lawn that was just sort of, it's like, I don't know quite what Edouard André was thinking, but it was very boring. So before COVID, I decided to put in this long reflecting pond. 110 yards. So it's literally a little longer than a football field. You can sort of see he started digging that. COVID came. He went out of business, and COVID came back, and Eric COVID was finished, and I said, well, let's find someone else to continue the fountain, the reflecting pond. And my attorney said, oh, no, you're in France, Mr. Corrigan, you can't do that. I said, well, why? We'll just hire someone new. And they said, no, because this man could, even though he's no longer in business, can always come back to you and say, I was contracted for that job. And the contract is not, I never finished the contract, so you need to pay me for the rest of the job, even if I'm not going to do it. So I physically had to just redesign what I was going to do to create something different. So I created this wonderful big round fountain, which in the end I'm actually happier with because I get the wonderful sound of the water, all throughout the gardens. Speaking of caterpillars, this is literally, the chateau when I bought it had these wonderful, you can't see it, but those are boxwood bushes which were this tall. And France has had a blight of caterpillars that have wiped out almost all the boxwood in France. The Chateau de Versailles no longer has boxwood. Those famous boxwood are gone. Vaux-le-Vicomte no longer has boxwood. Literally, this is, you can sort of see, it's sort of gray at the bottom and it gets green as you go up. That's the caterpillar going up and literally eating and destroying the boxwood. That was under my watch. I lost all the boxwood and ended up having to replace over 2,500 trees and shrubs throughout the property. There were also, the original plans showed a number of sculptures throughout the gardens that had just all disappeared over the years. So I set out to go out and buy, I had pictures of what some of the original sculptures were, to find similar ones. The one on the lower left is one of 4 that I found that William Randolph Hearst had bought for San Simeon. His mistress, Marion Davies, fell in love with them, and so he gave them to her, and they were at her home in Beverly Hills until 5 years ago when the house was sold, and I bought them and brought them back to Europe. And it has a wonderful kitchen garden, which was totally restored. And in the center of this kitchen garden was a well. Because this is a listed landmark, I was not able to put a swimming pool in. So I said, fine, I just made the well a little deeper, and I added hot water and a recirculating pump and a ladder that comes in and out. And it's a really nice well. I put a tennis court in up at the upper level, up where you see that beautiful wall. And throughout the woods, there are these wonderful follies, this little grotto and sculptures, et cetera, which have all been restored. And again, you get a sense of what the gardens look like today. Some of the focal points that I talked about of getting people to come out and enjoy the gardens. And again, I love having entertaining outside. I've actually have electricity in all the trees, so I have lanterns that can just be literally plugged in and hung if it's a nice evening, and having that wonderful sense of drama when you're outside as well. Hang on. And this is what the chateau, again, as mentioned today, the chateau, the Versailles of the fields that's in the French countryside. So my ending quote is this idea from Van Gogh, which is, the French air cleans up the brain and does a world of good. So I would say to you, today we've had a little tour of Paris, we've had a little visit to France, and I'd say it's time to, let's all book a flight and come see me in France. So thank you so much. And thank you. I'd love to take questions, because this is a great audience, and I'm sure you've got some wonderful questions. So we've got a microphone here. Come on, there must be some questions.
Raise your hand if you'd like a question.
I spoke to someone before who had a whole list of questions, so.
I'll ask, if you're going to ask a question, if you could just hold the microphone really close to your mouth so everyone on Zoom and in the room could hear, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. Who has a question?
Do you want to turn the light up, maybe? So you can...
I'm the person with all the little
Good.
blanks on my book. So one question I had was right at the beginning of the book, when you talk about using 4 colors of white on the decorative molding. How do you make decisions about where you put what color of white?
Great question. The question is, you actually take darker shades when you're trying to reinforce shadowing. So you'll take a lighter color if it's something that's projecting down, and you'll take a darker shade back up inside, because it reinforces the depth and actually accentuates the detailing. Along the same lines, I was going to say, if you're going to gild something, you always gild the outer part, the part that's curved like this, because it reflects light better. So it's, again, there's a whole little rules about how you do when you want to accentuate architectural detailing.
How would you change the gilding or gold if you're doing a piece of furniture and not a molding?
Again, like with gilding, you can actually make something, it's very common to have a very shiny gold mixed with a less shiny gold. And so again, you'd have the duller gold in the background and the shinier part in the foreground. Yes.
This is a little bit off topic, but I know you use marine varnish on fine furniture. Do you have a particular brand that you can recommend?
Yes. In America, I use a brand called Spar.
Spar.
And again, marine varnish is something that it's sort of like my trade secret. I try to tell everyone to use it. You can put marine varnish. I would do it on anything except like a museum quality, but the average antiques that any of us have at our homes are not that. You put a marine varnish, you can choose any finish. It can be high gloss, it could be satin, it could be matte, whatever. What it does is it allows you to put a glass down and that little white ring that develops, it doesn't develop that white ring. You can put a hot mug down, it doesn't do it. You can spill on it and wipe it up. So it's a way to more comfortably live in your home, because to me, comfort from a design perspective is more than just, is the sofa soft, is it, et cetera, is the fabric soft. Comfort is that practical aspect of, I can really live in my home without worrying about how I live in that room. I think we've all been in homes where the hostess or the host is a little uptight and they're like, oh, don't put that there, don't put your feet up. Well, you're not comfortable in that space. And so comfort is that aspect of really being able to live in it, and practicality is one of the key elements of that. So again, that's why I use so much solution dyed acrylic fabrics for sofas and chairs and things, so you don't have to worry about staining. Solution dyed acrylic is what's outdoor fabric. It's why I use things, I will use silks and other things like that in a very sparing way, maybe on a pillow, something else where you're not worried about how you live in it. Because again, I don't want people to feel that they have to worry about how they live in their home, whether it's a castle or a studio apartment.
Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry. I was trying to, can you repeat a little bit about the marine varnish? You put that over paint or just?
You don't need to do it over paint, but over a wood finish. So over any sort of wood finish, you can. You don't even have to strip it. You just put the marine varnish on top of the existing whatever the finish is.
Lovely. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, and I will be happy to answer any questions afterwards as well.
Yes, I wanted to ask, how much staff do you have at the chateau?
Well, after the last chateau, I was determined to design these gardens so they'd be low maintenance. So I literally just have one gardener who comes 2 days a week, and I have a housekeeper who comes 3 days a week. And so because it's a big house, I want it to be maintained and cleaned sort of all the time, but those bedrooms don't get used often. I've got an office in Paris, so I spend on average of 1 weekend a month at the chateau, so I don't use it all that often, but I want it to be in good shape when I get there. So I'll actually be spending this weekend there. So.
Do you intend to ever open it to the public like other French owners of chateaus?
In France, if you are French, you own a listed landmark, you actually you can get French subsidies to help restoration of some of the historical aspects. The trade-off is that you have to open it to the public on certain days. As an American, as a foreigner, we don't get those benefits. So I open it to